Excuse me. Magandang umaga po. Medyo inuubo tayo ng slide, pero nangako po ako na mag-live tayo about this. Marami po kasing nag-request ng live on the issue of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. So, but what we're going to do here is we might not be able to discuss comprehensively all of the agreements, pero kasi they are all interlocked and interrelated. So anyway, we'll do what we can today. Medyo pagod lang kasi ang daming ano, ang daming ganap at saka ang daming ginagawa all day. So at any rate, magandang gabi sa lahat, lalo na kay Huhu, Zaidi, Ma'am Hanilet, Jennifer, Leah. Sabi ni Ma'am, una ako, kaya lang hindi ko mabasa yung name na hatching ako. Oh my gosh, I really have a cold. It's really bad. Excuse me. Ellen, Ma'am Tatiana, Kai, Wei, I see it, Edmond, Melanie, Luis, Joy, Alisa, Faith, Bangers, Dij, Juanito, Ma'am Unique, Ellen, from Rose, Israel, Christine Ong, Celia, Vladimir, Zaidi, thank you for the super chat. Sabi niya, nice to catch you live again. Hello from Norway. Okay. So, dami niyo. Thank you. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Alright. So, the Philippines has 3 defense-related agreements with the United States. Yung Mutual Defense Treaty, Visiting Forces Agreement, at saka yung EDCA, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Now, ang treaty lang dyan which has been which has been upheld and ratified by the Senate is very short. It agrees that the two countries stand together in case of an attack. In other words, dinideklara na sa buong mundo na ang dalawang partido, ang Estados Unidos at ang Pilipinas, ay iisa kapag pagdating sa mga external attacks. Ang Visiting Forces Agreement, well, dati pursuant to the Mutual Defense Treaty, meron tayong mga military bases. Pero nung nawala na yung ating mga military bases, the United States felt and the Philippines agreed na they should still keep some kind of military presence dito. Ngayon, ang napagkasunduan ay ang Visiting Forces Agreement kung saan pumupunta dito ang mga tropa ng Estados Unidos at usually it is to conduct trainings. Ngayon, para maging extended ang stay nila dito, magkaroon sila ng lugar where they will stay for longer periods, nagkaroon tayo ng Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Ang kondisyon ng both Visiting Forces Agreement at ng EDCA ay walang magiging permanent bases dito. So, clear yan. Nagkaroon ng issues about the EDCA. Now, take note na yung EDCA is the offshoot of the Visiting Forces Agreement. Kapag inabrogate yung VFA, ma-abrogate din yung EDCA. Kasi ang purpose ng EDCA is para magtalaga ng lugar para sa visiting forces natin. Pero since bawal ang military bases dito, foreign military bases, gawa nga ng pag-kick out natin sa kanila dati, and to uphold our sovereignty, pinayagan temporary quarters. So that's the nature of these facilities where temporarily andito ang mga visiting forces. At yung govern nun, additional to that, is itself the EDCA. Okay? Ay magandang gabi dun sa mga bagong dating. Now, nagkaroon tayo ng konting issues about the EDCA because meron siyang mga pakay. Teka, hinahanap ko yung aking kopya ng EDCA. Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Ay, mali yung spelling. Alright. Ayon dito sa EDCA, di ko mahanap yung kopya ko bigla. Kasi parang pag kiniklik nyo yung OG, ang hirap hanapin. Nasaan na yung aking EDCA copy? Ayun. Hindi, may mutual defense. Hala, sinave ko na dati, di ko na mahanap ulit. PDF. Ayun. Ayan, we have it. Alright, dito sa EDCA, may ang purpose niya ay 5, no? Yung interoperability. Teka, nasa na ba yun? Interoperability, yung addressing short-term capability gaps, promoting long-term modernization, helping maintain and develop additional maritime security. Ito yung nature ng interoperability, ha. Dinagdagan pa nila ng other purposes, pero that's number 1, interoperability. And what does that mean? It means na pursuant to the Mutual Defense Treaty, yung interoperability na yon means both forces, the US and Philippine forces, will be able to not just respond, pero yung response nila, they will be able to operate together, cooperate in furtherance of that cooperation. Okay? Teka, hinahanap ko na. Wala bigla yung notes ko. Pasensya na kayo, ha? I have to find those. So, ngayon, nagkaroon ng issue ang EDCA sa atin because it was entered into in 2014. In 2016, it was President Duterte who became the leader of our country, and he was hesitant to immediately implement that. Now, bahagi dun sa initial stage ng EDCA was to set those areas kung saan i-house nga yung ating mga visiting forces. And he waited a long time. He, kumbaga, withheld the implementation or the actual implementation of the agreement until he had settled some issues with the US. Now, President Duterte had his manner of governance was to having the same policy, friend to all, enemy to none. He would play the interests of the countries that we had relations with, for example, with the US at saka with China. With every time there was something to be talked about, let's say there were loans from China and so on, he would uh, he would play off the interests of China versus the interests of the US and so on. So he was holding the something over these two countries when he would talk to them. So kapag kausap niya, let's say in China, there's always that he would show that he was talking with the United States, interested in all that and so on. When talking to the United States, pinapakita niya na hindi siya mag-aatubili na makipag-cooperate dun sa bansa na to play off the interests against each other. Hold on, ha? Sandali lang po. I'm hearing my dog kasi. I'm so sorry. And he's whining at the door. That's Yoshi. Hold on. Okay, Yoshi, stop. All right. No, Harry's inside. He's actually at the foot of my bed. But it's Yoshi who's whining. Sandali lang po, ha? Diyos ko. Hang on, I just really, hindi siya titigil. Give me 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Hold on. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, andyan na si Yoshi, nasa loob na. Pasensya na po. Alright, so with President Duterte, that was his manner of leadership. Alright, so he held off yung pag-implement dun sa EDCA and eventually identified 5 areas kung saan pwede sila i-house. Ngayon, oo, yung ingay ng dog ko, ng isang dog. Versus the youngest. So, sabi ni Mami, alright. I apologize, biglang nagaano. I'm actually closer now to my internet, to the Wi-Fi, pero for some reason, nagaano, nag humihina-hina at some point. Alright. So, ngayon, of course, it's time to reckon and di nagkakaroon ng Okay. Pakisabi kung may audio ako dito because for some reason, hindi nag-ano yung aking laptop. Bakit gano'n? Walang internet yung laptop. Okay, so meron ng audio uli. Okay, this is, I'm using my phone. Ano, backup ko to just in case you things like this happen. Alright. So may ilang po ha. Para hindi siya yumayan. Ayan. Alright. So, ayan na. Pareho nang nag-on both my laptop is back online. Okay, very good. Are you okay? Naririnig ko po ba? Alright. Here you go. Ayan. Maganda yan. Okay na. So, back online. Pakisabi kung okay na uli yung volume ko. Alright. Mahina ba ang volume ko now? Ano na lang, better na ba yung volume? Ayun, okay na po. Alright. Thank you. I'm really sorry for all these difficulties. Alam niyo naman, the travails of of our internet connection. All right. So, this time around, nagtalaga na ng additional na 4 sites. Unfortunately, hindi nire-release kung saan yung mga sites na yon and if they are located within military bases. Kasi as a matter of preserving yung not naman preserving, of asserting our sovereignty. Doon sila sa military bases sa atin, yung mga visiting forces. At nung inumpisahan na natin yung implementation ng EDCA, ay doon nga natin sila inilagay. Ngayon, part of yung rules about these visiting forces, yung mga US troops dito, is that they are supposed to allow access to their facilities completely to the base commander, but not to not to all of the troops of the camp that they're located in. Okay? Marami pa po yan, maraming rules yan, pero primary po is the access of the base commander. Hindi magagawa ng China na, okay, wala pa tayo po dyan sa China at saka gera-gera na yan. We're just talking about the agreement. So now, the reason that some people are confused or possibly worried about yung EDCA timing of the setting up. Yan. Si President Duterte delayed it because he needed to it was his way of sa pagsulong ng ating soberanya, he would try to get as much concessions as possible na from both the US and China. Bakit kasama dito ang China? Because of course, alam natin na the US is determined to minimize the influence of China dito sa Pilipinas. And likewise, China is eager to establish, to solidify their relations with the Philippines. In case it ever should come to a US versus China scenario. We're not talking about conflict yet, just a US versus China scenario where both will not just compete for the attentions of the Philippines, but when they start to have an actual diplomatic issues that would escalate into conflict. All right. Ngayon, locally, ang naging response dun sa surprise ng publiko is for OIC Senior Undersecretary of the DND, Carlito Galvez, to say na magbe-benefit ang mga kababayan natin dito sa EDCA kasi magkakaroon ng more jobs at saka ang pagpasok ngayon, yung additional sites na pinapasok ng US dito ay para tumulong pag-mitigate ng effects ng climate change. This is about rescue primarily. Kasi ano bang magagawa ng military forces in a country when you're talking about climate change? So primarily is and part of the reason that the visiting forces and EDCA was entered into was yung sa pagtulong nila lalong-lalo na in natural disasters. And particularly concerned tayo sa mga natural disasters born about by climate change. Okay? So, the surprise came because of the context, what we call the international relations context of the three countries. Dumadami po ang tinatawag natin na war talk or speculations about a possible conflict between the United States and China over Taiwan. So we know na umiinit yung sitwasyon doon. We don't know if it will ever, rise up to the level of conflict. But in preparation for any possibility, the US is preparing. So the Philippines would be an ideal jump-off point for its forces if they have to respond. Not just its forces, but also for the supply, equipment, refurbishing of ships, and so on, and aircraft, if it becomes necessary to do so. And they will, is this pursuant to the mutual defense treaty? No, it is not. Because the presumption sa mutual defense treaty is one for all. Meaning, you attack the US, we will respond. You attack the Philippines, the US will respond. Now, China is neither the Philippines nor the United States, so hindi po siya kasama dun sa MDT. Now, if, however, it comes to the point, some people are raising the possibility of the Philippines being caught in the crossfire, well, we already are, in the crossfire of an actual shooting war. Because some think tanks, and SAS has already cited some of them, have been saying that the battleground could be by proxy both of China and the US. And since we have relations with both of them, then the possibility becomes more real. We're not saying that it is real even now. We're saying that the possibility exists, but it is not yet actual. Ito, sabi ni Marvel, another factor din kasi is the TSMC. Sir, if you're going to make any, if you're going to use abbreviations, you have to spell them out first before you use them para nababasa namin, because we cannot discuss kung most of us do not understand what you're saying because you insist on on abbreviations. Let's already be clear. Another rule is, if you're asking about a law, don't give me the numbers, give me the title. Para hindi tayo nag-aaksaya ng oras dito. So, sabi ni Ma'am Jonalyn, so parang sinasabi na hindi kaya tugunan ng Pilipinas ang mga disaster during typhoons. Bakit nung panahon ni FPRRD, they tried their best without the help ng mga AFAM na magbigay ng rescue sa mga nasalanta? Ibig sabihin nito ng admin ni PBBM, di kaya need pa ng AFAM? Kasi existent na po yung EDCA. I think that it has no longer anything to do with whether or not we are capable, but that help is always welcome. Kaya naman natin on our own, but sometimes we can also be overwhelmed. And alam nyo, kahit ang US, when they're responding to Hurricane Katrina, matagal. So, there were other people who wanted to help also. So it isn't about whether or not we are capable. I think when it comes to disaster relief, the proof is in the pudding. Nagagawa naman natin, but we can also, there might come a time when we could be overwhelmed, and help will always be welcome. However, yun nga, it's one of the reasons na nakalagay sa MDT yung pagtulong sa environment pursuant to climate change. Now, consistent ang Philippines sa language natin when it comes to this, sa climate change, kasi naniningil na si Presidente Marcos sa ibang mga bansa na tulong kayo sa amin. Lalong-lalo na dun sa mga nag-epekto sa climate change, kasi considering na ang contribution ng mga highly developed and industrialized nations towards the ill effects of climate change mas malaki, at tayo primarily victim. Kung maliit ang contribution, malaki ang damage. Sabi ni Ki, at this point, when you say at point in time, redundant na siya. Can PBBM abrogate EDCA before the 1-year notice window on April? Because treaties, agreements, and so on are, how do you call this? Rely constantly on the agreement of both countries to bound by it. In principle, the countries can also agree not to be bound by it. Halimbawa, yung sinasabing reaffirmation ng EDCA by Trump and President Duterte really was, both leaders kasi were saying, is this necessary? President Duterte was using EDCA as a way of getting more concessions from the US by threatening to abrogate that and the Visiting Forces Agreement. And Trump was also saying, hindi naman natin kailangan ng US troops sa Pilipinas because it costs too much. So, later on, ang ginawa na lang both leaders, once they have been satisfied, they reaffirmed. Now, anong effect ng reaffirmation na ito? Wala. It only set, tuloy-tuloy rin yung kanilang pag-implement. But before that, both leaders were making noises about abrogating it because they needed to play off. President Trump was saying, you can't use EDCA or the Visiting Forces over because mahal yan sa amin. It's too expensive. Pwede man na, we can walk away. Okay? President Duterte was saying na wala naman kaming parity dito eh. Kayo nga, makakapasok kayo dito sa Pilipinas, wala nang visa and all that. Eh kahit naman ordinaryong mamamayan ninyo, visa upon entry. Kami, anong meron kami dyan sa US? And so on. Okay? The reaffirmation really is simply an acquiescence to the change in strategy or tactics of both leaders. Okay na, tuloy natin yan. Yan. The reaffirmation does not make EDCA more because its validity is already uncontested. The mere fact that both world leaders at the time were mentioning it and saying na hindi namin itutuloy is already an admission was in effect and that it was valid. Okay? So, huwag niyong sasabihin na the reaffirmation made EDCA valid and therefore BBM is bound by EDCA has been valid and has been upheld. Diba? And it is not a question of its validity anymore. A signal to the change in strategy of the two leaders. Kasi merong nakikipag-away dun sa comment section, no? At sinasabing, hindi, reaffirm na yan. Kaya hindi tayo nabudol with regard to BBM. Medyo malayong gapang, pero what they were saying is that, valid yan. BBM is bound by it and he has to implement it. There's no question. Nobody is questioning the validity. The issue before the public now is the timing. Okay? Gawa nga ng girian ng US at saka China, o girian actually ng China with Taiwan, na nagre-raise o nasa sa isip natin yung epekto ng girian na ito sa atin. Natin na ang US, kaya sila maingay tungkol dito sa EDCA at gustong ipatupad dito at magpadala ng additional na mga tao dito at sinasabing, may kami ng kasama niyan yung equivalent of 80 plus million dollars. Actually, sabi ng ibang sources ay 64 million lang US dollars. So, ibig sabihin, nilalantad at ginagamit tayo ng US bilang sangkalan sa kanilang pakikipaggirian sa China o ang Pilipinas. Meron kaming joint patrols. Meron kaming EDCA. Andito ng forces. Merong mga additional. So please take note na the additional sites also means additional equipment and material. Nagbabayad ba ng upa ang US? Hindi po. Gagamit sila ng bahagi ng military bases natin pero hindi po sila nagbabayad ng upa. Instead, ang sinasabi nila is magkakaroon ng benepisyo ang mga Pilipino gawa nga sa mga gagawin naming buildings which pag umalis kami maaari ninyong gamitin na or meron din kaming jobs in pagka pinatayo yung mga facilities na yon. But if you look closely at EDCA and so on and the other agreements of the US as well as the standard practices, usually ang paggagawa niyan ay gagamit ng US contractors din. Ang magkakaroon ng trabaho dito will be primarily yung mga laborers. But these are temporary jobs. Sabi ni Amik, equipment to mitigate climate. Hindi po yon ang sinasabi nila. It isn't equipment but the rescue and relief po efforts. Okay? Um, Sabi ni Ma'am Jonalyn, bakit nga po need pa ng additional sites? Well, to house additional troops and to house additional equipment, supplies, and other material. Why do they need additional? Well, walang nakalagay kasi dun sa sa EDCA uh, about such an explanation, nor is the US saying anything except to comply with the purposes of EDCA, which is, yeah, primarily interoperability. Diba? Hindi ko pa rin mahanap yung 5. Sandali lang po, ah. I'm terrible at these things. Nawala ko yung notes ko. Naka ano na ako doon, no? Ah, Ayun, no? Ang gagawin nila pagdating is to accelerate implementation of EDCA by concluding infrastructure enhancement. O so hindi pa pala necessarily ibig sabihin na may new structures. Enhancement means dadagdagan nila, magre-repair sila, pero at the end of their statement, sabi nila, develop new infrastructure projects at existing locations and exploring new locations to build a more credible mutual defense posture. Kasi yun nga yung part ng Mutual Defense Treaty yan. EDCA allows Washington to pre-position personnel and assets. So, that's precisely what EDCA was about. Ang EDCA sites, 2 daw sa Cagayan, 1 each Zambales, Isabela, and Palawan. So, although we are assuming those places have military bases and already are implementing partly itong ang EDCA, they're not it's not indicated kung there will be additional structures within the bases themselves. Hindi ko pa rin mahanap yung 5 yan. Okay, let me just search for it. There you go. Excuse me. Let me look then at your sorry. Let me look at your questions. Di ko pa rin mahanap. Okay. Now, ano yung mga primary concerns natin? Now, some people are concerned nga, bakit bigla tayong nag-uusap about EDCA? Well, because nga of the additional sites. Is there a need for additional sites? We don't know if the need is even a matter that we can discuss because it was already agreed upon that they would have several sites. Now, the increase in the number of sites at this particular time is what worries people. Even if agreed na yan, yung bagong mga sites na yan, pwedeng i-hold off yan. Walang nakalagay na they have to be done within a specific amount of time, within a certain date, and so on. Now, in 2025, will be the end of the 10-year period ng EDCA. I say period because it doesn't necessarily mean it's a deadline. But pwede nang mag-manifest halimbawa ang Pilipinas to not continue with EDCA. If no requests are made for the abrogation, for the final termination of EDCA by 2025, then tutuloy yan and tutuloy-tuloy siya. Wala nang deadline, wala nang term limit, pero you can terminate it after 1 year notice, similar to the visiting forces agreement. Okay? So, ibig sabihin yan, even beyond 2025, posibleng matuloy yung EDCA. And, but we can terminate it after giving proper notice. Now, this also means na pwede namang later on na idagdag yung other sites. Kasi yung last image ng Pilipinas with regard to the US's presence here was under President Duterte. Kumbaga, it was an uneasy peace because EDCA was entered into by the Aquino administration, and President Duterte was hesitant to implement it. Now, in the in the administration of President Marcos, uh, the impression is that he is eager to implement. Okay? And therefore, may have inadvertently sent a strong message, which he also did when he said na uh, the US will always be part of the Philippines' future, which seemed to some to be a sign na hindi lang itutuloy ang EDCA, but that he is fully cooperating with the US in a manner that was not done by President Duterte, and is interpreted by some people na parang lumilihis na doon sa friend to all, enemy to none. Sabi ni Manchus, pwede bang tutulan ng Kongreso, Senado, Supreme Court yung mismong EDCA o kahit yung mga additional sites lang? Buti lang mabait pa rin ang China, sana wag tupakin. Well, I think that as with any sovereign country, i-exhaust nila muna yung diplomatic efforts bago sila tupakin. Okay? Pwede bang tutulan? Well, tutol in what sense? Pwede naman mag-issue ng statement ng legislatura natin and say na this might not be the time and so on. The Supreme Court cannot unless there is a case before it. Pero the chief architect and implementer is the president. It is the executive's function and sole discretion to determine kung ano ang patutunguhan, ano ang mga polisiya, ano ang paano natin i-conduct ang international relations natin. Okay. Sabi ni Sir Tony, iba-iba yung mga opinion dito. I think presence of American bases here will lessen the bullying act. Guys, the bullying act of China. Number one, there will be no American bases here. Bawal po yun. Okay? What we will have is U.S. forces within our military camps or pre-agreed sites. Pero these are mere, how do you call this, visiting forces. Bawal po ang military bases. Okay? Will this be a deterrent to China's bullying? Tinatawag ninyong bullying. We agree na may issues talaga tayo with China with regard to our exclusive economic zone. Totoo po yan. However, it remains to be seen kung malilesen nga yung issues natin, or we could inadvertently trigger China into taking a more aggressive stance. Sabi ni Ma'am Ani, may power si PBBM mag-continue ng EDCA after 2025? Yes, since it is an executive agreement, then siya po yung primarily magde-decide niyan. Pag hindi natin sinignify doon sa US na hindi natin itutuloy, i-discontinue natin, i-consider na magiging tuloy-tuloy po ang EDCA. Sabi ni Janvid, oops, sorry. Yan. Japan and South Korea have US bases. Philippines has EDCA. Sa tatlo, I don't think na Pinas poses greater threat to China. Just continue the bilateral talks to China behind the scenes. Sir, hindi po natin iniisip it that China will consider as a threat, although that is one possibility. Pagka they come to the conclusion that the Philippines and the US are one single party, kumbaga, that will be going against the US. I'm sorry, against China. Ulit. That the Philippines and the US are one team going against China. But also, the possibility is raised with regard to uh, the Philippines becoming the common battleground of both the US and China. Because sila, ang ano nila parati, ang policy nila parati, war anywhere else but not in my backyard. Parang garbage lang. Yun. It's not just the danger that we will be identified with the United States, but more that we might be considered the expendable battleground. Of course, kailangan pang umabot dun sa punto ng and according to some experts, as included, the possibility is very real. Way I see it says, maski walang permanent base para sa US forces dito, magdadock lang sila sa mga ports or mag-anchorage off ports at near seaports. Parang may base na rin dito sila sa atin. No, I disagree. Ang sinasabi natin dito at ng mga international relations experts is that once we agreed to housing them here, and once we agreed to the, how do you call this, to the joint operations, we identified ourselves with the US. If they're merely docking here for refurbishing and so on, that is not a signal of our standing with them in any act of aggression or defense. Natawa ako dito. Sabi ni Butter Cheese Loaf, magpapanik lang ako pag nagpanik na si Attorney Tix. But how do you know I'm not panicking right now? Well, hindi. Sa akin is, I listen to the experts and read what they're saying. And I consider SAS an expert. However, uh, she has raised some very serious issues that I think is ripe for the administration to answer. Maganda sana kung merong public dialogue regarding this, which will help allay the fears of many of our citizenry. This is an opportunity for the president to address the nation with regard to these actions and the effects that he thinks will be the result, or the results, or what he thinks will be the result of this implementation of EDCA. Sabi ni Lorena, kaya ginyera ng Russia ang Ukraine dahil sa plan maglagay ng base ng US at NATO. What if ganun din gawin ng China? Kasi ang purpose ng EDCA is labanan ng US ang China to defend Taiwan. Well, it's one of the possible reasons, I agree. And yes, our being identified with the UN. Oops, sorry. There you go. Sorry. Naghang kasi yung phone ko kanina. Hold on. Ayun, okay na. Oops. All right. Dali lang po, I don't know why this is, yan. I don't know why my phone is doing this. Ayan. Ang ingay ng dogs. Sandali lang po. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Ay. Okay, there you go. That should be it. Once ma-fully, tanggalin ko na isa. Ayan. Once ma-fully realize na ang new fabs ng microchips sa US in 2024, sabi ni Marvel, mag-less ang presence ng US dito sa PH unless may bago silang agreement with Taiwan. Until then, the US will have its bases here. I think I disagree with that one kasi may MDT nga tayo eh. And it's not just, it's the presence in the region, the geopolitical significance, not necessarily of the presence of okay, wait, I get it. Oh yes, I understand. Um maybe you're right. That's a possibility. They're protecting their US citizens in Taiwan. But Taiwan has always been consistent with US interests as against China. So it might be both. I mean, well, even if less na yung US presence in Taiwan, they might consider Taiwan still as an important hedge to the expanding power. Kumbaga, pantabla siya doon sa expanding power ng China. But you're not wrong. Sabi ni boss, Abus, the way I look at these US access to our bases, EDCA, is just a strategy of PBBM for political leverage with US and China. I believe EDCA is just a tool and will be a win for the PH eventually. I don't think that's an issue. O sige, because yes, we strongly encourage the president to use this one kasi is the use of the projection of yan. The project kasi when you undertake things like US Navy will patrolling with the Philippines of additional personnel, and the EDCA itself is already a message that we are fighting with them, that we are identifying with their defense forces. So this is no longer a playing of one against the other. That's why titignan niyo yung ginawa ni Duterte, not comparing but just illustrating the action. Before actually allowing them, yun yung play. Yun yung sinasabi allow you gagawin ko para tablahin kayo, hindi nyo kami tinitigilan sa sa aming EEC. Trump, usap tayo. O kaya US hindi equal yung trato ninyo sa amin. Kausapin ko nga itong China. But he did not implement. Okay? The threat is the play. Yun yung politics doon. Yun yung laro doon. But once nandun na yung forces, once nag-agree na tayo doon sa joint patrols, hindi mo na magagamit yon to hedge against China. It's already final. Lalo yung um, Ma'am Dini, ay, okay. Sabi ni Ma'am Dini, may nabasa ako dyan, PRRD did not abolish EDCA as a balancing act to the US and China. Um, he couldn't abolish EDCA. It's already an agreement and it had a 10-year period. What he could do was to delay it. Kaya nga itong mga reaffirmationist nagsasabing reaffirmation, it it really was just this change in in strategy. Sabi ni Jake, bakit wala pa pong press conference ang presidente para ma-defend niya ang kanyang desisyon sa EDCA para maintindihan siya ng taong bayan? Bakit siya tahimik at nagbibingi-bingihan? Di po ba red flag yan? Di makaharap kasi nga opposite ito sa stand niya during the campaign. Um, hmm. I really don't know why there is none. But ang importante kasi is mapuno yung information gap. And I agree that his explanation would be well taken by the citizens. Um, but if hindi pwede, there are other ways para punuin yung information gap na yon. I think that eventually, if the government agencies are working, they should with the next day that is one of the criticism na yun, no? Ang need for information is not responded to immediately or as quickly as the public probably needs it. And maybe, yes, the Marcos administration may need to work on this one. Ito, sabi ni Ma'am Christine, PRRD couldn't abolish EDCA but he dragged his heels, correct, in building the basis. Ulitin ko po, please be careful with your language. Wala pong basis. That would be unconstitutional. So 1 out of 5 lang nagawa. 2 years na lang sana ngayon mag-drag ng heels yung statesman but nadagdagan pa ng 4 bases. And effective immediately po yon. So yun nga, those are the differences in their approaches. Ito, sabi ni Clysters, andiyan naman ang EDCA ng kay Pinoy pa naging big deal lang yan ngayon dahil sa Ukraine and Russia issue. Hindi rin naman matino kausap ang China so I think wala tayong karapatan mag-judge agad. Wait sir, no, may karapatan tayo mag-judge kasi tayo yung taong bayan. Tayo po our opinions. Tayo ang nagbigay ng power para makaupo ang ating mga opisyales. So we always have the right to do that. Now, andyan naman ang EDCA nung kay Pinoy pa. Yes, but it was entered into patakbo yung term niya with less than 2 years to go. Now, April 2014. Okay. Si President Duterte dahil sa Ukraine endangers us, yun nga po, and public safety, public security, and our welfare is always a concern. And yes, Yun, sorry, you're right. My signal is really bad. So, okay. Uh, Sabi ni Ma'am Dini, I find that BBM as president who listens to his people. Do you think he will listen and eventually comment on the scholars like Sas and Ma'am Anna? Uh, I think you're the one who made the assertion that he listens. So you tell me, do you think he will listen? Do you think he will respond? So, para sa akin, I think it might be his style talaga to let other people do the explaining. Uh, okay. Sabi ni Francis, if he will not provide information or at least assure the nation, then at least when the worst comes to worst, we know someone to blame, and I bet that would be the end of their political career. Okay. Nola, still here. Okay. Ayan. Sabi ni Draw Simply, ang hirap siguro ng posisyon nyo ngayon kung kayo pa rin ng PCO. I don't envy talaga si Sec Cheloy. Sabi ni Inokik, ang problema lang wala tayong ng info na available kay PBBM kaya napakahirap maglabas ng opinion tungkol dito. Hindi sir, ganito po yun. Yung opinion natin will be valid based on the information that we have. So kung gustong and we have a right to be well informed about what our government is doing. So sa totoo lang, dapat dinidemand natin. All of this confusion, we shouldn't be fighting with each other. Kung kunwari mali si Sas, mali si Prof. Ana, and so on, that would be okay if the people can give us side yan. Since grabe talaga itong signal ko na ito, sabi ni Ma'am Christine, is it the use of so it would be constitutional semantics lang. Ay nako, the signals are really bad. Ako, I disagree. Because a full-scale working, there's so much you can do in an actual base that they cannot really do pag nakikitira lang sila dito sa military bases natin. But you're right in that we have foreign military forces on our soil. Okay? Military kasi is very strong symbol sovereignty. So when they wear their uniform, they are exercising the power of the sovereign to strike foreign forces similar to giving up a certain amount of our sovereignty. Hindi lang po tayo ang may military dito. Mayroong military ang ibang bansa. Which is why people feel very strongly about foreign forces and foreign military bases here. Okay? Um, Sabi ni Tony Baldo, I'm just wondering why China does not do what the US is doing here in the PH, like joint military exercises. Well, because they do other things. They provide scholarships. Yes, they do. They provide, they have been working with other government agencies providing things like, oh, for instance, I know for a fact na donate sila ng equipment and so on to government agencies. So if they don't do military matters, they do help in civilian matters, which I think is much more acceptable for us as a sovereign nation. Because, di ba, it's a ceding of part of our sovereignty when they are here. Sabi ni Bob, ang lahat po ba about EDCA is negative? Wala po ba tayong makukuha dito ni maski kaunting magat EDCA? Well, there's that $80 million that they're allegedly going to be spending here, but most of which will probably go to government, US government contractors. Um, the problem nga is the very nature of both the visiting forces and EDCA. It's not just EDCA, it's really the visiting forces na mayroon ditong foreign military projecting their own sovereignty here. Diba? And it seems, it appears like we are ceding a certain, well, we are, a certain amount of our own sovereignty by having them here. So, also, there are people who are quite upset, beyond EDCA, that it appears that the president has deviated from friend to all, enemy to none, into a partisan stand, choosing once again a certain alignment forces, primarily those aligned with the US. So, we're not saying that everything is completely bad because yung mga joint trainings are essential for our military. Yun nga lang, sometimes the trainings require uh, advanced equipment, and that is something that we do not have or are not yet capable of providing. Ay nako, ang hina talaga ng signal. So maraming salamat sa lahat ng sumubaybay dito. We'll have another live po tomorrow, and let's deal with the other issues. But in the meantime, um, the discussion should be centered primarily on whether or not the actions of having additional um, sites for EDCA here, na if this is a good thing for us. So, wag na natin isama yung mga personalities and so on, kasi it's not necessarily a good thing to deviate from the discussion. Our discussion is primarily to whether or not it's a good thing. 'Di ba? Is it a good thing to have additional sites, particularly at this time? Yan ang dapat nagiging discussion. Huwag naman po tayo madistract dun sa mga away-away. Huwag po tayo madidistract na it's BBM versus Duterte thing. No, it's not. We're not talking about the leadership or whether the leadership is good or bad or we compare. No. What we should be thinking about is this a good thing? Or if it is not a good thing, what we can do to mitigate that. So, so yun po yun. The president, of course, cannot escape the criticism when people think that it's not a good time for it to be done right now, given the context of the US and China's rocky relationship. So, yun po yun. And that's something that we have to continuously think about and to monitor kasi nakikita na hindi naman static ang international relations. The issues or the relationship can change based on other factors. They might suddenly need each other again. They might need to settle certain issues like debt and so on that might be included in the considerations of whether or not the US and China will continue this belligerent attitude towards each other. Okay. Sabi ni, okay, so and let's not get sidetracked, ha? We're not talking about whether or not, remember, ha? Just remember this. Don't get sidetracked. What we're commenting on is whether or not this is a good thing for the current times. It's not necessarily a judgment on the president, not necessarily a judgment on both the former and present president. Because there's still something that can be done. Diba? If when the when the agreement, when EDCA expires, President BBM can play that up, can use that to gain more concessions for the country. O sige, we're going to continue this. But we should get paid. Pwedeng ganon. Or you should be delivering to us new equipment for the joint exercises, for the joint training. Or you should be giving us better equipment for the mitigation of climate change, such as rescue boats, rescue helicopters, things like that. Pwede yun. Um, that's when it expires. But in the meantime, what about these new sites? So we can't blame people when they think that this is a deviation. The president can say it is not or it is. But we should wait for him to say. But we want to wait for. We want to hear from him and to say that. And I think naman that ultimately he will discuss this whether directly or indirectly. And it's all right to it's quite all right. Tandaan po natin, maganda po ang diskurso. Maganda po ang yung mga public debates natin. Maganda po 'yan. Okay 'yan. Huwag tayong mamersonal kasi it deviates from the hindi kayo nakakapagdiskurso, walang na-enlighten, walang natututo, 'di ba? Walang lumalaganap ng impormasyon. So, if it becomes hindi magaling talaga si BBM or hindi pure ka kasi or yung mga ganyan or mga weak, mga ganyan, hindi nakakatulong yan sa diskurso. Sabi ni Kier Campbell, they can't talk kung wala pa naman sinasabi si PBBM. Says who? Wala naman pong requirement ng freedom of speech na kailangan mauna ang presidente magsalita. We need for him to speak out and fill in the information gap. But in the meantime, that doesn't prevent discourse on the information that is available now. Okay? Right, so maraming salamat. We'll have a live again and hopefully our internet will be far more stable then. So ayan, no, mas natutuwa ako sa mga comments because most of the comments have been on point, have been on the issue, and have not been about yung mga who is the better president and so on. I mean, of course, we can discuss that. Pero right now, nakakasagabal eh. Kasi ang tinitignan natin dito is is its suitability for these times given the context of the situation. So, maraming salamat. So, yes, and keep discussing even dun sa walls, sa comment sections namin dito sa Luminous, sa Trixie Cruz-Angeles and all that. Keep discussing. Huwag away kasi walang nangyayari. Pero discuss, discuss, discuss. We'll be able to get a better sense. And also, of course, our officials are listening. So keep discussing. 'Di ba? Keep talking about your opinion as well. And if you want some kind of change, make it a reasoned, evidence-based opinion. That way, pakikinggan tayo. Sabi ni Kits Barha, remove the hive mentality of ad hominems, pejoratives, and start developing informed opinions. Oy, maganda yan. Okay? But keep discussing. Keep talking about it. We can compel our officials to listen if we don't let this go. Okay, maraming salamat. Good night, everybody. Uy, don't forget, like and share. And paabutin niyo naman kami ng 100,000 sa YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye. Thank you.